In our discussion so far, we understood that the world is not a problem. Our attachment to it is the problem. The attachment could be to a person, to objects, to the pleasure from gratification, to power, to any subtle thing. From attachment arises desire. When desire is fulfilled, it leads to craving. And when obstructed, it results in anger. So let's try and find out, why does attachment arise? If we are not attached anywhere, then Padma Patra Mivambhasa, we will be like that drop of water on the lotus leaf which sits there unattached. There will be no question of desire. Anger and greed will go away by themselves. That is why in Hindi it is said, Vasana Chodo. Vas na chodo. You need to give up craving. You don't need to give up your household. Kamana chodo. Kam na chodo. Give up desire. You don't have to stop working. Arjun, before listening to the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, he was a warrior. After hearing the 18 chapters, he was still a warrior. What changed? Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. He gave up attachment to the results of his actions. So this attachment is the cause of the world sitting within us. If we can release it, we will be free while living in this very realm. So let's try and find out, why does attachment arise? After all, not everyone is attached to the same thing. Somebody is completely crazy over cricket. In India, there are cricket widows. The husband is so married to cricket, he's got no time for his wife. Somebody else is so attached to the wife, he's got time for nothing else. A third person is attached to wealth and indulges in bride burning, however macabre it is. It's a consequence of his attachment. What is it that creates the asakti of the mind? This is a very critical piece of information in the whole logic. Attachment happens when we repeatedly contemplate happiness somewhere. When we think there is pleasure in this, and we revise that thought again and again, the mind becomes attached. Like, for example, there are some teenage students who stand at a bus stop waiting for their respective buses. There are boys and there are girls. Now, one boy starts contemplating happiness in one girl, and thought of that girl gives his brain a dopamine kick, resulting in his contemplation there is happiness there. He doesn't realize the internal mechanism that took place, but he starts contemplating there is happiness in that girl. That chintan becomes so deep, the mind becomes completely attached. And he tells his friend, Yaar, I cannot sleep at night, I keep thinking about her. They say, are you crazy? We have been standing on the same bus stand, nothing happened to us. What happened to you? The only thing that happened was, he repeatedly contemplated happiness in someone, and that resulted in the mind getting stolen. Now that is useful wisdom. To utilize it, revise, contemplate, and decide accordingly. To help you in this process, I have put it down in this recently published book, The Science of Mind Management. Do possess your personal copy and drink deeply from the elixir of Vedic wisdom that is instilled in it. You see, whenever we think or do something, neurons in our brain get fired in the neocortex, prefrontal cortex, sensory motor region. Now, neurons that fire together, wire together. And a repeated firing of the same neurons creates these neural pathways or grooves. Like in the LPs of the olden days, there were the grooves where the stylus would sit. And those thoughts then come more easily to the mind. So the consequence of the contemplation is the attachment. How did anybody get attached to cigarettes? The first time he took a cigarette, did he enjoy it? Of course not. Then what happened? You know, when he went to college and got his newfound freedom, the student, he saw his classmates dangling cigarettes in their hands and he thought, wow, their personality is very impressive. He contemplated happiness there. He tried it out. It was a terrible experience. He coughed, his eyes became red, but there was a little kick, a little teeny weeny bit of pleasure, and he started contemplating it. The consequence, he was now smoking 1 cigarette a day, and then it increased to 2 a day, and then 10 a day. And one day he has become a chain smoker. The same cigarette now comes and pinches him in his brain. Smoke me, I will not let you live in peace. Somebody said the definition of a cigarette is what? A pipe that has got smoke at one end and a fool at the other. That fool knows that the Surgeon General warns that cigarette smoking is injurious to health. He says, yes, never mind. Why is this person behaving so insanely? Because of his attachment. This kind of addiction grips the mind, whether it's addiction to drugs or anything else. And it always starts with contemplation, chintan. One more example to seal the point. How do people become attached to tea? If you tell them, stop taking it, they say, you know, Swamiji, if I don't take tea, my head will become dizzy. So tell me, in India, 200 years ago, nobody was drinking tea. Was everybody's head dizzy? There were great yogis and munis. How come they were normal? There was a time when in the entire world, tea was drunk only in England. But when they ruled India, they realized there's so many people here. If we give them all the vyasan, the addiction to tea, our market will expand. And the old people tell us 70, 80 years ago, vans used to come to the residential areas and give free cups of tea. Slowly, people started developing the relish. And then they started charging 1 paise per cup. That increased to 5 paise, then 25 paise, 50 paise, 1 rupee, and now for 10 rupees you'll be lucky if you get a little cup of tea. People have become attached. Why? The same principle, contemplation. So if we contemplate happiness anywhere in this world, what is going to happen? The asakti of the mind will be unavoidable. And when the mind is attached, it is unavoidable that we will develop desires for that object, that person, that situation, that pleasure. And when desire arises, it can have only two results: fulfillment or unfulfillment. Fulfillment leads to craving or greed. Unfulfillment leads to distress and anger. And all of this arose from attachment. Let me give you an example to explain the whole logic now in one place. This is the story of the great Saubhari Rishi, whose name is there in the Rig Veda. And there is a Saubhari Sutra, and there's also a scripture written by him, the Saubhari Samhita. He was so advanced in his yogic practices that he would immerse himself in the holy Yamuna and do Jal Samadhi. But one day he had his eyes open on the river bed and he found two fish mating. Now that disturbed his mind. He started contemplating. The consequence was desire and craving. He got out from the river and decided, I need to satiate this. I must get married. The king of Ayodhya in those days was Mandhata. Saubhari went to the king's court and said, "O Rajan, I wish to marry. Give me the hand of one of your daughters." Mandhata had 50 daughters, but he thought, if I marry one of them to this thin, emaciated rishi, her life will be ruined. And if I refuse him, he may become annoyed and curse. What to do? So Mandhata played a trick. He said, "O sage, it will be as you wish. Please come tomorrow. I will bring the girls in front of you. Whoever selects you, you can marry her." Saubhari Rishi understood the king's scheme. He said, "All right." So overnight, Saubhari Rishi, he used his yogic powers to make himself young and extremely attractive. When he went to the king's palace and the daughters came before him, all of them selected him. They said, "Father, I wish to marry this person." Mandhata was bound by his words. He gave them all. And he wondered, now how will they all live with this one sage? But Saubhari Rishi had such powers of austerity. He manifested 50 bodies of his. They are called Prabhav Deh, created by yogic powers. And he also created 50 palaces. He stayed with each of his wives in those 50 palaces. And from each of them, there were 10 children born. These 10 children further had 10 children. A huge city got created. Thousands of years went by. And one day, Saubhari started thinking, "Aho imam pashyam me vinasham." Where was I practicing Jal Samadhi in the Yamuna? And where have I reached today? He then gave his advice to human beings. Learn from my lesson. I strived to fulfill the cravings of my senses with yogic powers, but there was never an end. Oh, human beings, you don't make this mistake. So the whole sequence now is clear to us. Contemplation of happiness leads to attachment. That creates desire. Its fulfillment results in greed and unfulfillment in anger. If we do not contemplate happiness in any material object, attachment will disappear, and all the subsequent diseases will also disappear. So let's try and figure out then, what is the reason for us contemplating happiness anywhere in this world? The final link in this chain. We will discuss it next time.